Arthur Vance had always felt like he was living in a gilded cage. Growing up in a world of polished surfaces, hushed tones, and unspoken expectations, he'd mastered the art of polite conversation and the correct way to hold a teacup, but he yearned for something real. His father, Mr. Sterling Vance, a titan of the city's property development scene, believed that relationships were primarily transactions, partnerships formed for mutual benefit, preferably measured in assets and social standing. Arthur had seen how his father eyed every acquaintance, every potential connection, through a filter of net worth and influence. It had taught Arthur a deep-seated suspicion, a reflex to question everyone's motives, but it also left him feeling profoundly lonely. He longed to be seen for who he was, not for the Vance name or the family fortune. After finishing his studies, instead of joining the family firm immediately, Arthur took a different path. He accepted a modest position with an architecture firm, working on a project in a small, slightly forgotten seaside town, miles away from the city's glitter and his father's watchful eye. It was a breath of fresh air, a chance to disappear into a place where the salt spray cleaned the air and the pace of life slowed to a gentle rhythm. It was in this town, nestled between rolling green hills and the endless blue of the ocean, that he found the quiet corner. It was a small, slightly cluttered bookshop with a few tables tucked into a nook where Clara Hammond served coffee and tea alongside worn copies of classic novels and dog-eared poetry collections. The air inside smelled of old paper, roasted coffee beans, and something faintly floral, like dried lavender. It was a haven of warmth and quiet charm. Clara was the heart of the place. She was younger than Arthur, perhaps in her late 20s, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled and hands that were often smudged with ink or flour from baking simple scones in the tiny kitchen. She moved with a quiet grace, welcoming everyone who entered, from the local fisherman stopping for his morning tea to the artist looking for inspiration in a dusty tome. Arthur found himself drawn to her immediately. She seemed entirely uncomplicated, her warmth genuine, her laughter bright and easy. He started visiting the quiet corner every day. At first, it was just for the coffee and the quiet atmosphere, but soon he found himself lingering, talking to Clara about the books, the town, the rhythm of the tides. He told her about his love for architecture, about his dreams of creating beautiful, functional spaces, carefully omitting any mention of his family's immense wealth or the pressure to join the real business of building sterile skyscrapers. He presented himself as an architect finding his way, comfortable but not affluent, here for the simple beauty of the project and the town. Clara, in turn, shared her love for stories, her struggles to keep the beloved bookshop afloat in a world increasingly turning to fleeting screens, and her quiet devotion to her elderly Aunt May, who lived just above the shop and required careful tending. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper, a quiet, steady love that felt more real to Arthur than anything he had ever known. Clara's affection was pure and unconditional. She loved him for his kindness, his thoughtful observations, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of architecture, not for his potential fortune. With Clara, Arthur felt truly seen, truly valued for himself. He started to believe for the first time that genuine, selfless love was possible, a stark contrast to the transactional relationships he'd witnessed his whole life. As the months passed, Arthur's project neared completion, and the time came for him to return to the city. He dreaded leaving Clara and the life they had built together in this quiet corner of the world. He knew he had to introduce her to his family, but the thought filled him with trepidation. He'd painted a picture of a simpler life to Clara, and he feared his family's world would be a shock, and worse, that their ingrained suspicion would taint the beautiful thing he had found. The opportunity arose when his father announced a rare family gathering, a formal dinner to celebrate a business milestone. Arthur knew this was his chance. He asked Clara to come with him. Clara was nervous but excited. She bought a simple, elegant dress she could ill afford and practiced her manners, wanting to make a good impression for Arthur's sake. The moment they arrived at the sprawling Vance estate, the contrast was jarring. The house wasn't just large, it was an architectural statement of wealth and power, all clean lines, imported marble, and priceless art. The air inside was cool and formal, the conversations polite but distant. Clara, used to the cozy chaos of her bookshop, felt like a small bird who had accidentally flown into an aviary of exotic, unapproachable creatures. Arthur's father, Mr. Sterling Vance, greeted Clara with a stiff, polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze seemed to sweep over her simple attire and quiet demeanor, evaluating and dismissing her in an instant. Throughout the evening, Clara did her best, answering questions honestly and politely, trying to connect with Arthur's family. But she felt their unspoken judgment, the subtle condescension in their tone. Mr. Vance cornered Arthur later in the evening, his voice low and firm. "Arthur," he began without preamble, "she seems sweet, but honestly, son, a girl who runs a failing bookshop in a town no one's heard of? What future do you see there? Are you sure her affections are entirely for you, or for the life she imagines you could provide?" Arthur's heart sank. It was exactly what he had feared. He defended Clara fiercely, speaking of her kindness, her resilience, her genuine spirit. Mr. Vance sighed, a sound of weary disappointment. "Naive, Arthur. You've always been too trusting. In our world, people aren't always what they seem. They see opportunities. A girl from her background, she must know the Vance name, even if you tried to hide it. She's likely seen this as her chance." "That's not fair," Arthur protested. But his father's words, dripping with years of ingrained cynicism, had found a chink in his armor. The suspicion he had fought against for so long began to stir within him. What if his father was right? What if Clara, sweet and genuine as she seemed, did harbor a hidden motive? The thought was a betrayal of everything he felt for her, yet it lodged itself stubbornly in his mind. The rest of the visit was strained. Clara felt the tension, the unspoken disapproval. On the train ride back, she was quiet, asking hesitant questions about Arthur's family, the sheer scale of their wealth, the formality of their lives. Each question, innocent as it was, felt like a tiny prick of confirmation to the doubt growing in Arthur's heart. He started to see her genuine curiosity through the lens of his father's suspicion. Was she simply trying to gauge the extent of his family's fortune? Back in the seaside town, the easy rhythm they had shared felt subtly off-key. Arthur watched Clara, his eyes now clouded with doubt. He saw the worry lines around her eyes, the way she fretted over the shop's accounts, her quiet exhaustion from caring for Aunt May. His father's voice echoed in his head. "She needs security. She sees you as security." He hated himself for thinking it, but the doubt was a persistent, insidious whisper. He needed to know, truly know, if her love could withstand hardship, if it was for him, the man, or for the potential comfort his world represented. He decided with a heavy heart on a desperate, cruel test. One rainy afternoon, sitting in the quiet corner, he told her the lie. His voice was shaky, his gaze fixed on his coffee cup. "Clara," he started, his voice low, "something terrible has happened. The city project, it collapsed. Financially, it's a disaster for the firm, and for me. It turns out the investment I thought was secure, it's gone. Everything I had saved, everything I was building on my own, it's lost." He paused, watching her face. Her eyes widened. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Arthur! Oh no! That's awful!" Her distress seemed genuine, but the seed of doubt made him question even that. "It means," he continued, pushing the lie further, "I can't afford to stay here anymore. My rent, even basic expenses, I'm wiped out. I might have to leave, go back to the city, try to figure things out, maybe find some small job to survive." He let the hopelessness seep into his voice. "It feels like everything I worked for is gone. My independence, my plans, all gone." He watched her intently, waiting for her reaction. Would she recoil? Would her warmth fade? Clara looked utterly devastated, not just for him, but for them. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't pull away. She reached across the small table and took his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Oh, Arthur," she whispered, I'm so sorry. That's a terrible blow. She held his hand, her thumb stroking his gently. But, but it's not everything, is it? You're still you. You have your talent, your knowledge, and you have me. He nodded, trying to read her expression. But I have nothing now, Clara. No prospects here. I can't even offer you a stable future. Clara's gaze was steady, full of a fierce, quiet love that momentarily silenced his doubts. Arthur, she said softly, we don't need a fortune to have a future. We have us. We'll figure something out. You could stay here, maybe help me with the shop, or teach a bit. We'll manage, I know we will. Her words were a balm, but the ingrained suspicion fought back. Was this genuine or a performance? He mumbled about needing time to think, to sort things out, and left the quiet corner feeling more conflicted than ever. In the days that followed, Arthur observed Clara from a distance, fueled by his internal turmoil. She didn't suddenly become cold or distant. If anything, she seemed even more preoccupied, more tired. The lights in the bookshop stayed on later. He saw her talking earnestly to neighbors, making phone calls. He saw her carrying heavy boxes, scrubbing floors with a new intensity. His doubts twisted her actions. Was she desperately trying to improve the shop's finances now that she thought he was poor? Seeing him as a potential burden instead of a savior? Was she trying to make the shop seem more appealing, hinting that he could join her failing venture? He couldn't bring himself to call her, caught in the trap of his own making, watching her struggle and misinterpreting it all. Then one evening, entirely by chance, he saw her. It was late, the town quiet. He was walking near the old antique shop down by the harbor. The light was on, and he saw Clara inside, talking to the owner, old Mr. Abernathy. He watched as she carefully unwrapped something small and delicate from a piece of cloth. He saw Mr. Abernathy examine it closely, then count out a small wad of bills. Clara looked tearful as she handed the item over. Arthur felt a prickle of guilt. What was she selling? He waited until she left, then went into the shop. Mr. Abernathy looked surprised to see him. Arthur, isn't it? From the architecture firm? Mr. Abernathy, Arthur said, trying to sound casual. Just walking by. I saw Clara leaving. Is she selling something? Is she all right? Mr. Abernathy frowned slightly. Clara, ah, yes, lovely girl, came in today. Had to sell her Aunt May's mother-of-pearl locket. Said it was an emergency, needed the money urgently. Breaks my heart, that locket's been in their family generations. Her aunt cherished it. But she said she needed it for, well, she was vague. But something about helping someone she cared about very much who was in trouble. He looked at Arthur kindly. Hard times hit good people sometimes. Clara's one of the best. Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. Aunt May's locket. Clara had mentioned it once. A treasured family piece. One of the few valuable things they owned. She had sold it, not for the shop, not for herself, but because she thought he was in trouble. She had made a genuine sacrifice, giving up something precious to help him. He rushed out of the shop, his heart hammering, shame washing over him in waves. He ran towards Clara's bookshop. He found her inside, slumped over a pile of books, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. She looked utterly exhausted, physically and emotionally. Clara! He cried, rushing to her side. She looked up, startled, her eyes red-rimmed. Arthur! What are you doing here? He knelt beside her, taking her hands. I know, he said, his voice choked with emotion. I know what you did. The locket. Mr. Abernathy told me. Clara's face crumpled. Oh, Arthur, I heard you were in such trouble, and I didn't have much. But Aunt May said, she said some things are more important than possessions, especially when you love someone. Clara, he interrupted, tears streaming down his face, tears of shame and profound regret. There is no trouble. My money, it's fine. The project is fine. It was a lie, a terrible, unforgivable lie. Clara stared at him, confusion clouding her tear-filled eyes. A lie? What are you talking about? He took a deep breath, forcing himself to confess the full, ugly truth. I lied about being broke. My family, they're very wealthy. My father? He doubted you. He thought you were only interested in my money. And, and some of his doubts, they got into my head. I was scared, Clara. Scared that the only reason anyone ever cared about me was because of my name or my family's fortune. I told you I was ruined because I wanted to see if you would still stay, if you would still love me, even if I had nothing. He poured out the years of living under his father's cynical gaze, the loneliness of his privileged world, his desperate need for genuine connection, and how his fear had twisted into this cruel test. I watched you, he confessed, working so hard, looking so worried, and even then, my stupid poisoned mind tried to find fault, to prove my father right. But you were sacrificing the most precious thing you had to help me, and I doubted you. He buried his face in his hands, overcome by the magnitude of his betrayal. I am so sorry, Clara, for lying, for doubting you, for hurting you like this. Can you ever forgive me? The silence in the little bookshop stretched, heavy with unspoken pain. Clara looked at him, her face a mask of shock and hurt. The revelation of his wealth was secondary to the raw pain of his distrust. He had tested her, manipulated her, doubted her love even as she was proving its depth with selfless sacrifice. You, you didn't trust me? She whispered, her voice trembling. After everything? After we built this safe place together? You thought, you thought I was after your money? Arthur couldn't meet her eyes. My father, his world, it's poisoned with suspicion, and I let it poison me. I was a fool, Clara, a terrified, doubting fool. She pulled her hands away from his, slowly rising to her feet. She looked utterly broken. I, I think you should go, Arthur, she said softly, her voice devoid of emotion, which somehow felt worse than anger. I, I need to be alone. I need to think. Clara, please, he begged, reaching for her. Go, she repeated, firmer this time, though tears were silently falling down her cheeks. Please, just go. Arthur left, the silence of the bookshop echoing his despair. The seaside town, which had been his refuge, now felt cold and desolate. He had destroyed the most beautiful thing in his life with his own hand, guided by the very cynicism he had tried to escape. The following days were in agony. Arthur couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He sent flowers to the bookshop, simple wildflowers he knew she loved. He wrote her letters, pouring out his heart, not making excuses, simply owning his mistake, expressing his deep remorse in the depth of his love for her. He knew words might not be enough, but he had to try. He stayed in town, hoping, waiting, giving her the space she needed, while also showing he wasn't running away from the consequences of his actions. He even went to Mr. Abernathy and quietly bought back Aunt May's locket, explaining the situation with painful honesty, asking him to keep it safe for when or if Clara was ready. He spent hours walking by the harbor, reflecting on his life, his father's influence, and the fundamental difference between the transactional world he came from and the world of genuine care and connection that Clara inhabited. He realized that his father's wisdom wasn't protection, it was a prison of the heart. Clara's love was a treasure beyond any fortune, and he had nearly thrown it away because he was too afraid to believe in it. Days turned into a week into 10 days. The silence from Clara was deafening. He started to despair, fearing he had lost her forever. Then late one afternoon, a small envelope appeared slipped under the door of his temporary lodging. It was addressed in Clara's neat hand. His heart leaped into his throat. Inside was a single short note. The quiet corner. Tomorrow. 3 p.m. Arthur arrived at the bookshop promptly at 3. The closed sign was on the door. He took a deep breath and opened it. The bell above the door tinkled, a familiar, comforting sound. Clara was standing by the counter, bathed in the soft afternoon light filtering through the window. She looked tired, but her eyes held a quiet resolve. He walked towards her, his palms sweating. Clara, he said, his voice trembling slightly. She didn't speak at first, just looked at him, searching his face. The air was thick with unspoken emotions, the pain of the past weeks hanging between them. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Arthur, you hurt me deeply, deeper than you know." "I know," he said, his voice low with humility. "There's nothing I can say to excuse it. I was wrong. Terribly, profoundly wrong." She nodded slowly. "The lack of trust? That was the hardest part. To think you believed I could, that my love wasn't real, even after everything." "I was lost in my own fear," he confessed. "Blind. I let my father's cynicism poison my view of the world. Of you. I was a coward, Clara. It was easier to doubt you than to trust fully and risk being hurt. But I hurt you instead. The person I swore to cherish." He took a hesitant step closer. "I bought back the locket," he said softly. "It's safe. I understand now, truly understand, what it meant. What you meant." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, polished shell she had once given him, the one he kept with him always. "This," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is my true wealth, the connection I found with you, here, in this quiet corner. The rest is just noise." Clara looked at the shell, then back at him. She saw the genuine remorse in his eyes, the vulnerability he rarely showed. She saw that the test, as cruel as it was, had stripped away his defenses and forced him to confront his deepest insecurities. He wasn't just apologizing for the lie. He was confronting the person he had been pressured to become. A long moment stretched between them. Then very slowly, a fragile smile touched Clara's lips. It was a weary smile born of pain and reflection, but it was a smile nonetheless. "It will take time, Arthur," she said softly, "to heal, to trust again fully." "I know," he replied, his heart soaring with a cautious hope. "And I will spend every single day earning it back, with honesty, with patience, with unwavering trust in you." She reached out a hand, not to hold his, but to gently touch his cheek. "Okay, Arthur," she whispered. "Okay." It wasn't an instant magical fix, but it was a beginning, a fragile thread of hope, carefully rewoven. Over the following weeks, Arthur didn't press her. He came to the shop, sitting quietly, helping stock shelves, making small repairs. He talked to Aunt May, listening patiently to her stories. He was simply there, present and steady, proving his commitment not with grand gestures or revealed wealth, but with consistent kindness and unwavering sincerity. He began to understand that true love isn't about proving worthiness through trials, but about building trust through shared vulnerability and unwavering belief in each other. Slowly, carefully, their connection began to mend. The warmth returned to Clara's eyes when she looked at him. They started talking again, really talking, about everything. His world, her world, the fears that had driven him, the pain she had felt. The trust, once shattered, was being rebuilt, brick by careful brick, on a foundation of brutal honesty and shared understanding. Arthur did eventually tell her the full extent of his family's fortune, but by then it felt almost irrelevant. Clara knew the man beneath the wealth, and she had proven beyond any doubt the purity of her heart. He chose to invest, not just money, but his time and energy, into the town, helping Clara expand the quiet corner, making it a thriving heart of the community. He found that building something real, brick by brick, trust by trust, was infinitely more satisfying than any skyscraper his father built. They married in the small local church, a simple, heartfelt ceremony filled with the people from the town who had welcomed Arthur and stood by Clara. Mr. Sterling Vance did not attend, but Arthur no longer sought his approval. He had found his own true measure of worth, not in his bank account, but in the eyes of the woman who had loved him unconditionally, survived his terrible test, and taught him the true meaning of trust, forgiveness, and a love that could weather any storm. Their life together wasn't about wealth or status. It was about the quiet strength found in mutual respect, unwavering belief, and a love built on a foundation of truth, deep in their own quiet corner of the world.